The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital emergency room burned my eyes as I sprinted through the automatic doors, my scrubs still damp with sweat from my 12-hour shift. My 8-year-old son, Danny, lay unconscious in the intensive care unit tubes and wires, connecting his small body to machines that beeped with mechanical precision. The doctor's words echoed in my mind. Severe head trauma, internal bleeding, broken ribs. As I reached for his pale hand, my phone buzzed insistently. My mother Patricia's name flashed on the screen, and instead of asking about her grandson's condition, her first words cut through me like ice. "Tomorrow is your sister's birthday party. Make sure you help prepare." When I stammered that I couldn't leave the hospital, she delivered her ultimatum without hesitation. "If you don't come, I'll cut you off financially and from this family forever." The steady rhythm of Danny's ventilator filled the silence as I pulled the uncomfortable plastic chair closer to his bedside. His face looked so small against the white hospital pillow, purple bruises blooming across his left cheek like storm clouds. Dr. Harrison had explained everything in measured clinical terms, but the reality felt surreal. Severe concussion, grade 3 liver laceration, 3 fractured ribs on his right side. Each diagnosis hit me like a physical blow. I traced back through the weekend's events with painful clarity. Friday evening, I had dropped Danny off at my mother's house on Maple Street, the same Victorian home where I'd grown up 32 years ago. He'd been bouncing with excitement in the back seat, chattering about helping Grandma Patricia prepare decorations for Madison's 30th birthday celebration. His backpack was stuffed with his favorite books and the new action figures he wanted to show her. "Mom, do you think Grandma will let me help frost the cake?" he'd asked, pressing his nose against the car window as we pulled into her driveway. The memory of his bright smile now felt like a knife twisting in my chest. According to the police report Officer Davis had shown me an hour ago, Danny had fallen down Patricia's basement stairs around 2:30 Saturday afternoon. The basement where she stored her holiday decorations and party supplies. The same basement I'd warned her about countless times because the wooden steps were steep and the railing was loose. But something about the story didn't add up. Dr. Harrison had pulled me aside privately, his expression troubled behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Thompson, I've been practicing emergency medicine for 15 years, he'd said quietly. "The pattern of your son's injuries is unusual for a simple fall downstairs. The placement of the bruising, the angle of the rib fractures. They suggest he may have been pushed or struck before falling." The words had hit me like a physical assault. Pushed? Who would push an 8-year-old boy? And why hadn't Patricia mentioned anything about Danny being upset or injured when I'd called her Saturday morning to check on him? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through our text messages from the weekend. Saturday morning at 9:15. "How's Danny doing?" I'd written. Her response came back immediately. "Fine. Helping with party prep. Don't worry." No mention of accidents, no emergency calls. The next communication I had received was from St. Mary's Hospital at 4:47 in the afternoon. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. Nurse Jennifer poked her head through the doorway, her expression sympathetic. "Mrs. Thompson, the social worker would like to speak with you when you have a moment. Nothing urgent, just standard procedure for cases like this." Cases like this. The phrase sent chills down my spine. What exactly was a case like this? I nodded, unable to find my voice, and Jennifer disappeared back into the hallway. Danny's fingers felt cold and small in my hand. I studied his face for any sign of consciousness, any flutter of his eyelids that might indicate he was fighting his way back to me. The bruises extended down his neck, disappearing under the hospital gown. How had my mother not noticed how badly he was hurt? How had she waited nearly 2.5 hours to call for help? The elevator doors opened with a mechanical ding, and my mother's voice echoed down the hallway before I could see her. Patricia swept into the ICU waiting area like she owned the place, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the circumstances. She wore her best navy suit, the one she reserved for church and important occasions, and carried herself with the authoritative posture that had intimidated me since childhood. Behind her followed my sister Madison, whose red-rimmed eyes and smudged makeup suggested she'd been crying. Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan flanked them like bodyguards, their faces stern and disapproving. The entire family delegation moved with purpose, and I instinctively knew this wasn't a comfort visit. "Janice, we need to talk," Patricia announced, not bothering with pleasantries or asking about Danny's condition. Her sharp blue eyes swept over my wrinkled scrubs and tangled hair with obvious distaste. "You're being completely unreasonable about tomorrow's party." I stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, Danny is unconscious. He has bleeding in his brain. How can you possibly be thinking about a party right now?" Madison stepped forward, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "Janice, I know you're upset, but this is my 30th birthday. I've been planning this celebration for 6 months. 50 people are coming. The caterer, the photographer, the DJ. Everything is already paid for and arranged. Your nephew is in intensive care," I said, my voice rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. "The party should be the last thing on anyone's mind." Uncle Robert crossed his arms, his expression disapproving. "Now, Janice, you're being dramatic. The doctor said Danny is stable, right? There's nothing you can do here except worry. Madison needs family support right now." Family support. The words came out sharper than I intended. Where was family support when Danny was lying at the bottom of basement stairs for 2 hours? Patricia's face flushed red, and I saw the dangerous glint in her eyes that I remembered from childhood confrontations. "How dare you question my judgment? I did everything I could for that boy. I called the ambulance the moment I found him." "The moment you found him?" I stood up, anger overriding exhaustion. "You were supposed to be watching him. How do you just find a child after he's been hurt?" Aunt Susan stepped between us, her voice taking on the condescending tone she'd perfected over decades of family disputes. "Janice, honey, you're overwrought. Maybe you should consider that this whole situation happened because you've been working too much lately. Children need constant supervision." The accusation hit me like a slap. "What are you saying?" "We're saying that maybe if you paid more attention to Danny instead of working all those extra shifts, he wouldn't have been so eager to help with dangerous tasks at his grandmother's house." Robert added, his voice cold. "Children act out when they don't get enough attention at home." I felt the blood drain from my face. They were blaming me for Danny's injuries. Somehow, in their twisted logic, my working double shifts to provide for my son had caused him to fall down Patricia's stairs. Madison moved closer, her voice taking on a pleading tone. "Janice, please. I know you're scared, but Danny is going to be okay. The doctors said so, right? And I've already told everyone you'll be there tomorrow to help with the last-minute setup. If you don't show up, I'll look like I don't have family support. People will think something is wrong with our family." "Something is wrong with our family," I whispered, sinking back into the chair beside Danny's bed. "My son is lying here unconscious, and all you care about is appearances." Patricia's expression hardened. "Don't you dare take that tone with me, young lady. I've supported you financially for 3 years since your divorce. I pay half your rent, Danny's school tuition, his health insurance premiums. Without my help, you'd be living in some government housing project." The threat was clear, though unspoken. Fall in line or lose everything. "I've sacrificed a lot for this family." Patricia continued, her voice gaining momentum. "I could have sold that house and moved to a retirement community in Florida, like my friends. Instead, I stayed here to help you raise that boy. I think I deserve a little gratitude and cooperation." Nurse Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her expression uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, but you're disturbing other patients. I need to ask you to keep your voices down or take this conversation to the family lounge." Patricia straightened her shoulders and fixed the nurse with an icy stare. "We're discussing family business. My grandson's welfare is hardly a disturbance." Your grandson needs rest, Jennifer replied firmly, and his mother needs support, not additional stress. The family exchanged glances, and I realized they'd coordinated this intervention beforehand. They'd come here together with a unified message: put the party before Danny's recovery. Madison pulled up a chair and sat beside me, reaching for my hand. Janice, I love Danny too, but life has to go on. The party is just one day and then everything can go back to normal. You can spend all the time you want here afterwards. Normal. I pulled my hand away. My 8-year-old son is in intensive care. Nothing about this is normal, and nothing is going back to the way it was. After my family finally left, promising to give me time to think about my priorities, I sat alone with Danny as the afternoon shifted into evening. The weight of Patricia's financial control pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. She was right about one thing: I couldn't afford our current lifestyle without her help. Since my divorce from Marcus 3 years ago, Patricia had positioned herself as my financial savior. When Marcus stopped paying child support and disappeared to California, she'd stepped in with monthly payments that covered half our rent on the small 2-bedroom apartment on Elm Street. She paid Danny's tuition at St. Augustine's Academy, his health insurance premiums, and often bought his clothes and school supplies. But her generosity came with strings attached, invisible chains that I was only now beginning to recognize. I thought about the countless times she'd used her financial support to influence my decisions. When I'd wanted to move to a less expensive apartment in a different school district, she'd threatened to stop paying tuition if I disrupted Danny's education. When I'd considered dating Mark, the kind teacher I'd met at Danny's school conference, she'd made pointed comments about how men didn't want to take on other people's financial responsibilities. Every major decision in my life for the past 3 years had been filtered through the question, what will Patricia think? Will she cut off support? I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, scrolling through 3 years of transactions. Patricia's contributions were there every month like clockwork: $800 for rent, $500 for tuition, $250 for insurance. Nearly $1,600 monthly that I'd become completely dependent on. But looking at the pattern now, I realized something disturbing. The amounts had been increasing gradually over time, and with each increase came more control, more expectations, more guilt when I didn't comply with her wishes. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. A woman in her 40s with kind brown eyes and professional attire stepped into the room. Mrs. Thompson, I'm Angela Martinez, the hospital social worker. Do you have a few minutes to talk? I nodded, grateful for any distraction from my spiraling thoughts. Angela pulled up a chair, her manner calm and non-threatening. I understand you're dealing with a very stressful situation. I've spoken with the medical team and I wanted to check in about your support system. How are you holding up? Honestly, I don't know, I admitted. My family thinks I should leave the hospital to help with my sister's birthday party tomorrow. Angela's eyebrows raised slightly, but her expression remained neutral. That must feel very isolating. Can you tell me about your relationship with your family? Something about her genuine concern opened floodgates I didn't know existed. I found myself explaining Patricia's financial control, the constant guilt trips, the way every conversation became about what I owed her for her help. It sounds like you're experiencing something called financial abuse, Angela said gently. It's more common than people realize, and it doesn't just happen in romantic relationships. Family members can use money as a tool for control too. Financial abuse. The words gave a name to something I'd felt but never understood. But she is helping me. I really can't afford everything without her support. Help and control aren't the same thing, Angela explained. Genuine help empowers you to become more independent over time. Control keeps you dependent and afraid to make your own choices. She pulled a folder from her briefcase and handed me several pamphlets. There are resources available for single mothers, government assistance programs, sliding-scale childcare educational grants. You have more options than you might realize. I stared at the pamphlets, feeling a flicker of hope mixed with fear. But these programs, Patricia always said they were for people who couldn't take care of themselves. Patricia doesn't get to define your worth or your choices, Angela said firmly. You're a licensed nurse practitioner working full-time to support your child. You're exactly the kind of person these programs are designed to help. She paused, then added quietly, "There's something else I need to mention. I've reviewed Danny's medical records and spoken with Dr. Harrison. There are some inconsistencies in the story about his accident that we're required to investigate." My stomach dropped. What kind of inconsistencies? The timing, for one thing. Your mother reported the accident happened around 2:30, but medical evidence suggests Danny's injuries occurred earlier. There's also the pattern of his bruising and fractures that don't align with a simple fall downstairs. I felt the room spinning around me. Are you saying someone hurt him deliberately? I'm saying we have an obligation to investigate when a child's injuries don't match the explanation we're given. Child Protective Services will likely want to interview both you and your mother. The words hit me like ice water. CPS, an investigation, the possibility that someone had deliberately hurt my son. Angela reached over and squeezed my hand. I know this is overwhelming, but you need to know that protecting Danny is more important than protecting family relationships or financial security. Whatever happened to him, he deserves to have adults who put his safety first. After she left, I sat staring at the pamphlets in my lap, resources for single mothers, financial assistance programs, educational grants for healthcare workers, all the things Patricia had convinced me didn't exist or weren't meant for people like me. I thought about the timing Angela had mentioned. Patricia's story was that she'd found Danny at the bottom of the stairs at 2:30, but when I'd called her Saturday morning, she'd said Danny was helping with party preparations. What had he been doing between our call and the supposed accident? For the first time in 3 years, I began to wonder if Patricia's help was worth the price I'd been paying. And for the first time since arriving at the hospital, I started to think about what my life might look like if I stopped being afraid of losing her support. Sunday morning arrived with the pale gray light that comes before sunrise. I'd spent the night in the uncomfortable reclining chair beside Danny's bed, dozing fitfully between nurse visits and machine alarms. My neck ached and my mouth felt dry, but I couldn't bring myself to leave his side for more than a few minutes. At 6:30, just as the morning shift nurses were beginning their rounds, Danny's eyelids fluttered. My heart jumped, and I leaned forward, grasping his small hand. "Danny, sweetheart, can you hear me?" His eyes opened slowly, unfocused and confused. He tried to speak, but the ventilator tube prevented any sound. Panic flickered across his features as he realized he couldn't talk. "It's okay, baby. You're in the hospital, but you're safe now. The tube is helping you breathe. Just squeeze my hand if you can hear me." His fingers tightened around mine, weak but deliberate. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I pressed the call button for the nurse. Dr. Harrison arrived within minutes, along with the respiratory therapist and 2 nurses. "Good morning, Danny. I'm Dr. Harrison. You had an accident, but you're going to be okay. We're going to remove this breathing tube so you can talk to your mom. It might feel uncomfortable for a moment." The process took several minutes, and Danny coughed and gagged as the tube came out. His voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. Mom, I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here." He looked around the room with wide, frightened eyes. "Where am I? Everything hurts." "You're at the hospital. You fell down Grandma's stairs, remember? But the doctors are taking very good care of you." At the mention of Patricia, Danny's expression changed. Fear flickered across his face, and his grip on my hand tightened. Grandma was angry. He whispered, his voice so quiet I had to lean close to hear him. The pretty vase broke. It wasn't supposed to break. Dr. Harrison moved closer, his expression alert. "Danny, can you tell us what happened before you fell?" Danny's eyes darted between me and the doctor, uncertainty clear in his young face. "I was trying to help carry decorations upstairs. Grandma said I was clumsy. The vase fell off the table when I bumped it. What happened after the vase broke? Dr. Harrison asked gently. She yelled, really loud. She said I ruined everything. Danny's voice grew even quieter. She grabbed my arm tight. It hurt. Then someone pushed me and I fell down the dark stairs. Someone pushed me. The words echoed in my head like a scream. Dr. Harrison caught my eye and gave a slight nod, his expression grim. Danny, who pushed you down the stairs? I asked, my voice barely steady. But he was fading again, his eyelids growing heavy. Mom, I'm tired. My head hurts really bad. Rest now, sweetheart. We can talk more later. As Danny drifted back to sleep, Dr. Harrison gestured for me to follow him into the hallway. His face was serious as he closed the door behind us. Mrs. Thompson, I need to document what Danny just told us. His account suggests this wasn't an accident. I leaned against the wall, feeling dizzy. But why would Patricia hurt him? She loves Danny. She's always doted on him. Child abuse often happens with people the child trusts, and it frequently occurs during moments of stress or anger, not as premeditated violence. He paused, studying my face. Has your mother ever shown signs of having difficulty controlling her temper? I thought about Patricia's explosive reactions when things didn't go her way, the silent treatments that could last for days, the cutting remarks disguised as concern, the way she'd berated me on the phone yesterday while Danny lay unconscious just rooms away. She gets very upset when things don't go according to her plans, I admitted. She's always been intense about having control over situations. Mrs. Thompson, I'm required by law to report suspected child abuse to the appropriate authorities. A CPS investigator will need to interview both you and Danny when he's stronger. The reality of the situation hit me like a physical blow. My mother, the woman who'd raised me, who claimed to love Danny, had potentially pushed my 8-year-old son down a flight of stairs because he'd accidentally broken a decoration for Madison's party. My phone buzzed with a text message. Patricia's name appeared on the screen. The party starts at 2. You need to be here by noon to help set up. Don't embarrass this family. I stared at the message in disbelief. Danny had just regained consciousness and possibly identified his attacker, and Patricia was still focused on the birthday party. Dr. Harrison noticed my expression. Is everything all right? I showed him the text message. My mother wants me to leave the hospital to help with my sister's party, even after what Danny just told us. Mrs. Thompson, I think you need to seriously consider whether your mother should have any access to Danny going forward. If what he's saying is true, she represents a danger to his safety. I looked back through the window at my son's sleeping form, so small and vulnerable, surrounded by medical equipment. The bruises on his face seemed darker in the morning light, and I could see finger-shaped marks on his upper arm that I hadn't noticed before. For 3 years, I'd convinced myself that Patricia's support was worth the emotional cost. I'd told myself that Danny needed his grandmother in his life, that family was important no matter how complicated the relationships became. But looking at him now, I realized that no amount of financial help was worth putting my child at risk. And if Patricia was capable of pushing an 8-year-old downstairs in a moment of anger, what else might she do if I continued to defy her demands? I pulled out my phone and typed a response to her text. I won't be coming to the party. My place is with my son. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a flicker of strength returning. Whatever consequences came from standing up to Patricia, I could handle them, but I couldn't handle putting Danny in danger ever again. Around 11 o'clock, as nurses bustled through their morning rounds, Madison appeared in Danny's doorway. She looked different than she had the day before, less composed, more desperate. Her usually perfect blonde hair hung limp around her shoulders, and she'd clearly been crying for hours. Janice, we need to talk, she said, glancing nervously at Danny's sleeping form. Can we go to the cafeteria? I hesitated, reluctant to leave Danny's side, but something in Madison's voice suggested this conversation was important. I asked Nurse Jennifer to keep a close eye on him and followed my sister down the sterile hospital corridors. The cafeteria was nearly empty except for a few tired-looking medical residents grabbing coffee between shifts. Madison chose a corner table far from other people and sat across from me fidgeting with her engagement ring. "Mom is furious," she began without preamble. "She's been calling everyone telling them you've had some kind of breakdown and that's why you can't help today." A breakdown? I stared at her in disbelief. My son is in intensive care. "I know, but you have to understand how this looks. 50 people are coming to my house in 3 hours. The caterer is already setting up, the DJ is arriving soon, and half the family still thinks you're going to show up to help with decorations." Madison's priorities felt surreal. Danny told the doctor this morning that someone pushed him down those stairs. This wasn't an accident. Her face went pale and she looked away. Kids say all kinds of things when they're confused and hurt. Head injuries can cause memory problems. You think he's making it up? I think he's an 8-year-old boy who's been through trauma, and maybe his memories aren't reliable right now. But her voice lacked conviction, and she still wouldn't meet my eyes. I studied my sister's face, noticing the way she avoided direct eye contact, the nervous energy in her movements. "Madison, do you know something about what happened?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I knew this day would come eventually. "Oh, what day? What are you talking about?" Madison looked up, and I saw genuine fear in her eyes. "Janice, there are things about our family that you don't understand. Things Mom made me promise never to tell you." My blood went cold. "What things?" "The money she gives you every month, it's not coming from her retirement savings like she told you. She's been claiming Danny as a dependent on her taxes for 3 years. She gets government benefits for his care educational assistance food stamps. She's been pocketing money meant for you and Danny, then giving you a portion back to make you feel dependent on her." The words hit me like a physical blow. "That's impossible. I would know if she was claiming him as a dependent." "Would you? When was the last time you actually saw your tax documents before signing them?" "She picks them up from your mailbox, remember? Says it's easier if her accountant handles everything since you're so busy with work." I thought back over the past 3 years of tax seasons. Patricia had insisted on handling everything through her accountant, claiming it would save me money and ensure I got all available deductions. She'd bring me simplified forms to sign, saying the details were too complicated to worry about. She's been intercepting your mail," Madison continued. "Benefit applications, tax refunds, anything from social services. You probably qualify for assistance programs you don't even know exist." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice hollow. Madison's composure finally cracked. "Because I've been complicit in it, and I can't live with the guilt anymore. She promised me that when Dad's estate is finally settled, I'll inherit the house and most of his investments, but only if I kept quiet about her schemes and supported her version of events." Dad's estate. My father had died 5 years ago, and I'd assumed his modest savings had been used for funeral expenses. What estate? The life insurance policy worth $200,000 that she never told you about. The investment accounts Dad had been building for years. The house that's been paid off since before we were born. Madison wiped her eyes with a tissue. "She's been telling the probate court that you're financially irresponsible and that leaving you any inheritance would hurt Danny's welfare." I felt the world tilting beneath me. "How long have you known about this?" "Since right after Dad died." She sat me down and explained that family wealth needed to be protected, that you just spend any inheritance on unnecessary things. She convinced me that she was looking out for everyone's best interests. "And you believed her?" Madison's face flushed with shame. I wanted to believe her. "Do you know how much money I've been spending on this party? $25,000, Janice, for one night. Jason and I are drowning in debt from the wedding last year, our mortgage payments, my student loans. The promise of inheriting Dad's money has been the only thing keeping me afloat." I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in years. The designer clothes, the expensive apartment, the elaborate parties, all funded by the hope of inherited money that should have been shared between us. There's more, Madison said quietly. Yesterday, when you wouldn't commit to helping with the party, Mom told me something that made me realize how far she's willing to go to maintain control. What did she tell you? She said if Danny died from his injuries, it would actually solve a lot of problems for the family. No more dependent claims to worry about, no more risk of you discovering the financial fraud, and you'd be so devastated that you'd never question her support again. The words hit me like ice water. She said that about her own grandson. She said accidents happen and sometimes they work out for the best. That's when I realized she's not the grandmother we thought she was. She's not even the mother I remembered from childhood. Madison reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Janice, I think she deliberately hurt Danny, and I think she's been planning for months to find a way to get rid of him if he became too much of a liability. Why didn't you say something yesterday when everyone was pressuring me about the party? Because I was terrified. She has evidence of my cooperation with the tax fraud. If she goes down, she'll take me with her. I could lose my job, my house, everything. Madison's voice broke. But after thinking about what she said about Danny, I realized that staying silent makes me just as guilty as she is. I pulled my hand away, anger overriding shock. So you decided to tell me now after my son almost died? I'm telling you now because she's getting more dangerous. This morning, she asked me to bring a pillow to the hospital when I came to visit Danny. Said it would be more comfortable for him than the hospital pillows. The implication was clear and it made me feel physically sick. She's also been asking detailed questions about your work schedule, when you take breaks, how long you usually stay with Danny at night. I think she's planning something, Janice. I stood up abruptly, knocking over my untouched coffee. I need to get back to Danny. I shouldn't have left him alone. Wait, Madison called after me. There's one more thing. I recorded a conversation with her this morning on my phone. She doesn't know, but I have evidence of some of the things she's admitted to. If you decide to pursue legal action, you'll need proof. I stopped and turned back. What kind of things? Admissions about the tax fraud, complaints about Danny being a financial burden, and... Madison hesitated. She admitted to pushing him down the stairs. She said he deserved what he got for breaking her expensive vase and ruining the party preparations. The cafeteria seemed to spin around me. You have her admitting to child abuse on recording. Madison nodded, pulling out her phone. I started recording our conversations weeks ago because she'd been making increasingly scary comments about you and Danny. I thought I might need evidence someday to protect myself. I need that recording. I'll email it to you, but Janice, once you use this evidence, there's no going back. She'll destroy both of us if she can. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw a woman who'd been trapped in Patricia's web of manipulation just as much as I had been. The difference was that she'd chosen complicity over resistance, and that choice had cost my son his safety. Madison, I need you to understand something. After today, I don't think we can have a relationship anymore. You had information that could have protected Danny, and you chose to stay silent to protect your inheritance. Her face crumpled. Janice, please, I'm trying to make it right now. You're making it right because you finally realize that Patricia might target you next, not because you care about Danny's welfare. I turned toward the elevators. Send me that recording, then stay away from us. As the elevator doors closed, I saw Madison sitting alone at the cafeteria table, crying into her hands. Part of me felt sorry for her, but a larger part felt only cold determination to protect my son from anyone who would put money and family appearances before his safety. When I returned to Danny's room, I found my best friend Sarah waiting by his bedside. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. Sarah had been my anchor through the divorce, my cheerleader when I'd gone back to school for nursing, and the closest thing to family I had, besides Danny. Jenny called me. she said, standing to give me a fierce hug. I came as soon as I could get coverage for my cases. Sarah worked as a staff attorney for the county's Legal Aid Society, specializing in family law and domestic abuse cases. If anyone could help me navigate the legal nightmare that was unfolding, it was her. Sarah, I think my mother has been committing financial fraud, and I think she deliberately hurt Danny. Her expression grew serious. Tell me everything. I explained Madison's revelations about the tax fraud, the intercepted mail, the hidden inheritance, and Patricia's recorded admission about pushing Danny. Sarah listened without interruption, taking notes on her phone. Janice, this is bigger than just family dysfunction. If what Madison told you is accurate, Patricia has been committing multiple felonies. Tax fraud, identity theft, mail fraud, and now assault on a minor. What do? I don't even know where to start. We start by documenting everything and building a case that protects Danny. Sarah pulled out her laptop. First, I'm going to request copies of all tax returns filed with Danny as a dependent for the past 3 years. Then we'll petition the court for emergency custody protection and a restraining order against Patricia. Can you do that? I can file the paperwork this afternoon. With Danny's medical condition and his statement about being pushed, plus Madison's recording, we have enough evidence to get temporary protection while the investigation proceeds. Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. She glanced at the screen and frowned. It's my paralegal. She's been researching your mother's background. I should take this. She stepped into the hallway and I could hear fragments of her conversation through the door. Multiple properties. How many years? No, that can't be right. When she returned, her expression was grim. Janice, sit down. We've discovered some things about Patricia that change everything. I sank into the chair beside Danny's bed, bracing myself for more revelations. My paralegal ran a comprehensive background check. Patricia owns 3 properties in addition to the family house. A rental duplex downtown that generates monthly income, a vacation cabin in Colorado, and a commercial building that she leases to a dental practice. That's impossible. She told me she was living on Dad's modest life insurance and Social Security. The properties are held in a family trust that lists her as the primary beneficiary and administrator. The trust was established with your father's life insurance money, but instead of distributing it according to his will, she's been using it as her personal investment portfolio. Sarah pulled up documents on her laptop screen. The trust was supposed to provide college funds for Danny and any future grandchildren, with remaining assets split equally between you and Madison after Patricia's death. Instead, she's been using trust income to supplement her lifestyle while claiming poverty to maintain control over you. How much money are we talking about? Based on the property values and rental income conservatively, she's worth at least $800,000. The monthly income from her properties alone is more than most people's salaries. I felt nauseous. While I'd been working double shifts and accepting Patricia's sacrificial help with guilt and gratitude, she'd been living off money that should have been supporting Danny's education and our financial independence. There's more, Sarah continued. The government benefits she's been claiming with Danny as a dependent total nearly $2,000 per month. Food assistance, childcare vouchers, educational grants, housing assistance. She's been collecting all of it while you struggled to make ends meet. She's been stealing from my son. She's been stealing from your son while simultaneously making you financially dependent on her so you couldn't discover the theft. Sarah's voice was hard with anger. This is one of the most sophisticated cases of financial abuse I've ever seen. What about the recording Madison mentioned? I'll need to hear it. But if Patricia admitted to pushing Danny, that's evidence of assault and battery on a minor. Combined with the financial fraud, she's looking at serious prison time. A knock interrupted our conversation. Detective Williams from the county sheriff's office stood in the doorway with CPS investigator Carol Thompson. Both wore expressions of professional concern. Mrs. Thompson, we'd like to speak with you about your son's case, Detective Williams said. We understand there have been some new developments. I looked at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. This is my attorney, Sarah Chen. She's been helping me understand the legal aspects of the situation. Detective Williams pulled up a chair. We've been investigating the circumstances of Danny's injuries and several red flags have emerged. The timeline your mother provided doesn't match the medical evidence, and now we understand Danny has made statements suggesting this wasn't an accident. What kind of timeline discrepancies? Sarah asked. Carol Thompson consulted her notes. Patricia claimed she found Danny at the bottom of the stairs at 2:30 Saturday afternoon and immediately called for help. But the hospital's emergency admission records show Danny arrived by ambulance at 4:47. That's over 2 hours, I said. What was she doing for 2 hours? According to emergency responders, when they arrived at Patricia's house, she appeared to have been cleaning. The basement had been mopped and decorative items that should have been scattered from Danny's fall had been neatly arranged on tables. Sarah and I exchanged glances. She was destroying evidence. It appears she spent considerable time staging the scene to support her version of events. We also found fragments of a broken vase in her outdoor trash bin, along with cleaning supplies and paper towels that tested positive for blood. Detective Williams continued, We've obtained a warrant to search Patricia's house more thoroughly. We're particularly interested in any recordings she might have made correspondence about financial arrangements and evidence of the tax fraud your sister mentioned. Madison has a recording of Patricia admitting to pushing Danny, I said. She's supposed to email it to me. We'll need the original file for evidence, Carol Thompson said. Recordings can be crucial in cases like this, but we need to maintain chain of custody for legal proceedings. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Madison's message contained an audio file with the subject line, I'm sorry, this is the right thing to do. Sarah downloaded the file and played it through her phone's speaker. Patricia's voice was clearly audible, cold, and matter-of-fact. That boy got exactly what he deserved for destroying my property. I've spent 6 months planning Madison's party, and he ruined it in 5 minutes with his clumsiness. A good shove down the stairs might teach him to be more careful in the future. Madison's voice responded, Mom, you could have seriously hurt him. Some children need stronger discipline than others. Janice has been too soft on him. A little fear might make him more respectful. The recording continued for several more minutes with Patricia complaining about the financial burden Danny represented and her frustration with my ingratitude for her support. Detective Williams and Carol Thompson listened with increasingly serious expressions. When the recording ended, Detective Williams spoke first. Mrs. Thompson, this recording combined with the medical evidence and scene inconsistencies gives us probable cause for criminal charges. We'll be arresting Patricia later today on charges of assault and battery, child endangerment, and obstruction of justice. What about the financial fraud? That will require coordination with federal authorities since it involves tax crimes and mail fraud, but the local charges alone are enough to keep her away from Danny while the investigation continues. Carol Thompson added, We'll also be requesting emergency custody protection for Danny. Patricia will not be allowed any contact with him, supervised or otherwise, until this case is resolved. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, I felt like I could breathe freely. Danny would be safe. Patricia's manipulation was finally being exposed, and with Sarah's help, I might actually be able to build an independent life for my son and myself. What happens next? I asked. We arrest Patricia, execute the search warrant, and begin building the case for prosecution, Detective Williams said. You should also know that when we searched government records for benefit fraud, Patricia's name came up in connection with similar schemes in 2 neighboring counties. Similar schemes? She's been claiming dependency status for other relatives' children while providing minimal support to their families. The federal investigation is likely to uncover a pattern of fraud spanning several years and multiple victims. Sarah squeezed my hand. Janice, this is going to be difficult, but you and Danny are going to be okay, and Patricia is going to face consequences for what she's done. As the detective and social worker left to coordinate the arrest, I looked down at Danny's peaceful face. He was still unconscious, but his color looked better, and the doctors were optimistic about his recovery. For 8 years, I tried to provide him with a stable, loving family that included his grandmother. I thought that maintaining family connections was important, even when those connections came with emotional and financial costs. Now I realized that the most important thing I could do for Danny was protect him from people who would hurt him, regardless of their relationship to us. Family wasn't about blood connections or financial obligations. Family was about safety, respect, and genuine love. And Danny and I were going to build a real family together, one that didn't require us to sacrifice our dignity or safety for anyone else's comfort. Late Sunday evening, after Detective Williams had called to confirm Patricia's arrest, I finally allowed myself to leave Danny's bedside for more than a few minutes. He was stable, sleeping peacefully, and the medical team felt confident about his recovery trajectory. I needed a shower, clean clothes, and time to process everything that had happened. In the hospital's family lounge, I sat with a cup of terrible coffee and tried to make sense of the past 3 years. Patricia's manipulation had been so thorough, so expertly crafted, that I'd never questioned the narrative she'd created about my life. But now, with her lies unraveling, I found myself examining other stories she'd told me, particularly the story about my divorce from Marcus. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Marcus's number. I deleted it dozens of times over the years, but somehow always ended up adding it back, just in case Danny ever needed to reach his father. Patricia had always discouraged any contact, saying it would confuse Danny and give Marcus opportunities to hurt us again. But what if that was another lie? My finger hovered over the call button. Marcus lived in Sacramento, now working as an engineer for a tech company. We'd had no contact since he'd stopped paying child support 3 years ago, and I'd convinced myself that he'd simply abandoned his responsibilities as a father. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered, "Janice, is everything okay? It's pretty late." Marcus, I struggled to find words. Danny is in the hospital. He was hurt yesterday, and some things have happened that made me realize I might not have the whole truth about our divorce. There was a long pause. Danny is hurt. What happened? Is he going to be okay? The genuine concern in his voice surprised me. Patricia had always insisted that Marcus didn't care about Danny, that he'd been relieved when I'd stopped pursuing child support. He has a concussion and some internal injuries, but the doctors think he'll recover. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, whatever you need. Why did you stop paying child support? Why did you disappear from Danny's life? Another long pause. Janice, what do you mean I never stopped paying child support? I felt the world tilt beneath me. What are you talking about? You haven't paid anything in 3 years. That's impossible. I've been sending $800 every month to your mother's address like the court ordered. She said you preferred it that way because you didn't want direct contact with me. My mouth went dry. You've been sending money to Patricia. Every month for 3 years. She said you were struggling but too proud to ask for help directly, so she was acting as an intermediary. She sends me pictures of Danny, sometimes updates about school, that kind of thing. Pictures of Danny, updates about school. Patricia had been maintaining a relationship with Marcus while telling me he'd abandoned us. Marcus, I never received any of that money. I thought you'd completely abandoned your financial responsibilities. Jesus Christ, Janice. Are you telling me Patricia has been stealing Danny's child support for 3 years? I'm telling you that my mother has been committing massive financial fraud, and apparently that includes stealing from you too. I explained everything that had happened over the weekend, from Danny's injuries to Patricia's arrest to the discovery of her various schemes. Marcus listened with growing anger. I can't believe this. I've been wondering why you never responded to any of my letters or emails. Patricia said you'd asked her to handle all communication because seeing my name upset you too much. What letters and emails? I've been writing to Danny every month since the divorce. Birthday cards, Christmas presents, school encouragement pictures from my life here in California. Patricia said you were reading them to him, but that he was too young to write back. My vision blurred with tears. Marcus Danny thinks you forgot about him. He asks about you sometimes, and I've been telling him that some fathers just can't handle the responsibility of children. Oh God, Janice, I've been heartbroken thinking he didn't want anything to do with me. Patricia said he was angry about the divorce and needed time before he'd be ready for contact. She told you that she's been very involved in managing our relationship or lack thereof. She said you were both doing well, that Danny was thriving in school, and that maybe someday when he was older, he might want to visit me in California. I thought about all the times Danny had asked about his father, all the Father's Day projects at school that he'd had to make for his grandfather instead, all the nights he'd wondered aloud why his dad didn't love him enough to stay in touch. Marcus, she destroyed our marriage too, didn't she? What do you mean? I mean, she was constantly in our business when we were married, always pointing out problems, always predicting that things wouldn't work out, always offering advice that seemed to make things worse between us. Marcus was quiet for a moment. She did seem to know about every fight we had, every disagreement about money or parenting decisions, and she always had suggestions for how you should handle things differently. She told me you said you weren't ready to be a father when I got pregnant with Danny. I never said that. I was scared about the financial responsibility, but I was excited about becoming a dad. I told her that, in confidence, when she asked how I was feeling about the pregnancy. She told me you said having a baby would ruin your career plans. Janice, I said I was worried about balancing work and family, which is normal for any new parent. But she somehow turned every private conversation into evidence that I wasn't committed to you and Danny. The manipulation was even more extensive than I'd realized. Patricia hadn't just controlled my post-divorce life. She'd actively sabotaged my marriage to ensure that I'd be dependent on her afterward. She needed me to be a single mother. I said slowly, the pieces falling into place. If my marriage had worked out, if you'd remained involved in Danny's life, she wouldn't have been able to control us the way she has. It sounds like she's been playing a very long game. How is this possible? How did we not see it? Because she's incredibly good at manipulation and because we trusted her. She was my mother, and you wanted to maintain a good relationship with your mother-in-law. Janice, I want to be involved in Danny's life again. I know it will take time to rebuild trust, but I've missed so much already. He's going to need time to understand that you didn't abandon him. But Marcus, I think he'd like to know his father. Would it be okay if I flew out there? I'd like to see him even if he's still in the hospital. I thought about Danny's questions about his father, his confusion about why some kids had dads who came to school events while others didn't. I think he'd like that very much. What about you? Are you okay with me being involved again? It was a fair question. Our marriage had ended badly with hurt feelings and unresolved anger on both sides. But knowing what I now knew about Patricia's role in our problems, I wondered how much of that conflict had been genuine and how much had been manufactured. I think we owe it to Danny to try being co-parents. We don't have to figure out everything else right now. Agreed. I can be there by tomorrow evening. After we hung up, I sat in the quiet lounge trying to absorb this latest revelation. Patricia hadn't just stolen money and benefits. She'd stolen years of relationship between Danny and his father. She'd deprived Danny of knowing that his dad loved him and wanted to be part of his life. But maybe it wasn't too late to rebuild what had been broken. Danny was young enough that having his father back in his life could still make a meaningful difference. And maybe with Patricia's manipulation, finally expose Marcus and I could find a way to work together as parents without the constant interference that had poisoned our marriage. I walked back to Danny's room, feeling cautiously hopeful for the first time in years. My son would recover from his injuries, he would be protected from Patricia's abuse, and he might actually get the chance to know his father. Patricia's web of lies was unraveling, but what was emerging underneath might actually be better than anything we'd lost. Monday morning brought a parade of visitors that I hadn't expected. Word about Danny's condition had somehow spread through my workplace and his school, and people were responding with an outpouring of support that left me speechless. It started with my supervisor at the clinic, Dr. Rebecca Foster, who arrived at 7:30 with a fresh coffee and a folder of paperwork. "I've arranged family medical leave for as long as you need," she said, settling into the chair beside Danny's bed. "Your shifts are covered for the next 2 weeks, and your colleagues have organized a meal train so you don't have to worry about cooking when you get home." "Rebecca, you didn't have to do all that." "Janice, you're one of our best nurse practitioners. You've covered countless shifts for other people when their families needed them. This is what colleagues do for each other." She handed me the folder. There's also information about the hospital's employee assistance program, counseling services, financial planning resources, legal aid referrals, whatever you need to navigate this situation. An hour later, Danny's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, arrived with a card signed by his entire third-grade class. The cover featured a crayon drawing of a hospital with Danny smiling and waving from a window surrounded by hearts and get-well messages. "The children have been asking about Danny since this morning," she said, her warm eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. "They wanted him to know they're thinking about him." Mrs. Rodriguez had taught at St. Augustine's Academy for 15 years, and her genuine care for her students was evident in everything she did. She pulled up a chair and spoke quietly so as not to disturb Danny's rest. "Janice, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I need to tell you something that's been bothering me for weeks. Danny's behavior changed significantly over the past month." "Changed how?" "He became anxious about spending weekends with his grandmother. Several times he asked if he could stay at school late instead of being picked up by her on Fridays. When I asked him why, he said he was worried about making mistakes at her house." My heart ached thinking about Danny carrying that anxiety alone. "Why didn't you call me?" "I considered it, but he begged me not to say anything. He said his grandmother told him that adults who caused problems for family members were selfish, and he didn't want to be selfish." The manipulation had extended even to an 8-year-old's understanding of family loyalty. Patricia had trained Danny to protect her secrets by making him feel responsible for family harmony. "There's something else," Mrs. Rodriguez continued. "About 2 weeks ago, your mother came to school and requested a meeting with the principal. She wanted to discuss Danny's behavioral issues and suggested that his academic performance was suffering because of instability at home." "What behavioral issues? Danny is a good student." "Exactly. That's what I told Principal Martinez. Danny is well-behaved, academically strong, and well-liked by his classmates. But your mother presented a very different picture. She claimed he was acting out at home, showing signs of emotional disturbance, and that you were too stressed to handle the situation effectively." I felt cold. What was she trying to accomplish? "I think she was laying groundwork to support a claim that Danny needed a more stable living situation. The principal asked me to document any concerning behaviors I observed, but there weren't any to document." "Did she ask for anything else?" "She requested that emergency contact information be updated to list her as the primary contact instead of you. She said your work schedule made you unreliable in crisis situations." The systematic nature of Patricia's planning was becoming clear. She'd been building a case for months to support the claim that I was an unfit mother and that Danny would be better off living with her permanently. Mrs. Rodriguez reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. "I've brought copies of all my classroom observations and notes about Danny's academic performance for the past 6 months. If you need evidence of his actual behavior and well-being, These documents show that he's been thriving academically and socially despite whatever was happening at home. Thank you. This could be very important for the legal case. I also wanted you to know that the school community is behind you. Several parents have asked how they can help, and the parent-teacher organization is organizing meal deliveries and childcare support for when Danny comes home. After Mrs. Rodriguez left the school counselor, Mr. James Patterson arrived with more disturbing information. Janice, I've been reviewing my notes from sessions with Danny over the past month. He's been seeing me weekly since mid-October because his teacher noticed signs of increased anxiety. I wasn't told about counseling sessions. Your mother brought him in for the initial consultation. She said you'd requested it, but were too busy to attend the meetings yourself. Another lie. Patricia had been managing every aspect of Danny's life while keeping me uninformed. What did Danny talk about in these sessions? He expressed confusion about family loyalty versus honesty. He described feeling caught between wanting to please his grandmother and feeling uncomfortable about some of the things she asked him to do or say. What kinds of things? She apparently coached him to tell you that he preferred staying at her house on weekends, even though he told me he missed being home with you. She also asked him to report conversations you had about money work stress and your feelings about the family. Danny had been turned into an unwilling spy in his own home. Most concerning, he expressed fear about what would happen to you if his grandmother became angry. He seemed to believe that his behavior could somehow put you in danger financially or emotionally. She made him feel responsible for protecting me. Children in manipulative family systems often develop an inappropriate sense of responsibility for adult problems. Danny has been carrying emotional burdens that no 8-year-old should have to handle. Mr. Patterson handed me his folder of session notes. These documents also support your case. They clearly show that Danny has been experiencing stress related to his grandmother's expectations, not behavioral problems at home with you. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. Former colleagues, neighbors from my old apartment complex, other parents from Danny's previous school. The story of Patricia's arrest had apparently made local news and people were reaching out to offer support. Sarah arrived around 3 o'clock with updates on the legal front and news about the community response. The local news story about Patricia's arrest mentioned that you're a single mother working in healthcare, she explained. A fund has been started at the community bank to help with Danny's medical expenses and your transition to financial independence. People are donating money to help us. Over $3,000 so far. The bank manager called this morning to let me know that several local businesses want to contribute as well. I was overwhelmed by the generosity of people who barely knew us. For 3 years, Patricia had convinced me that I was isolated, that without her support, I'd have nowhere to turn for help. But the community response showed me something different. There were people who cared about Danny's well-being and my struggles as a single parent. There were resources and support systems I'd never known existed because Patricia had systematically cut me off from discovering them. There's something else, Sarah said. The district attorney's office called. Patricia's case has been assigned to a prosecutor who specializes in financial crimes and elder abuse. Apparently, your situation isn't unique. What do you mean? 3 other families in the county have come forward since news of Patricia's arrest broke. Similar patterns of financial manipulation, control over grandchildren, and systematic isolation of adult children from community resources. The scope of Patricia's manipulation was even broader than I'd imagined. She'd been running similar schemes with other families, perfecting her techniques for control and exploitation. The good news is that multiple victims make for a much stronger case. The prosecutor is confident about securing convictions on multiple felony charges. As evening approached and the stream of visitors finally slowed, I sat beside Danny's bed, reflecting on the day. I'd started the morning feeling alone and overwhelmed, convinced that I had no support system beyond Patricia's manipulative help. But the reality was completely different. I was part of a community that cared about my family's well-being. There were people willing to help us rebuild our lives without demanding control over our choices in return. Danny stirred in his sleep, and for the first time since the accident, I felt genuinely optimistic about our future. We would recover from this trauma both physically and emotionally, and we'd do it surrounded by people who wanted to help us succeed, not people who needed us to remain dependent. Tuesday morning brought the first official legal proceedings in what Sarah warned would be a complex and potentially lengthy court battle. Patricia had retained Franklin Webb, one of the county's most expensive defense attorneys, known for his aggressive tactics in high-profile cases. At 9 o'clock, we gathered in Judge Martinez's chambers for an emergency hearing on my petition for a protective order against Patricia. I'd expected a routine procedural hearing, but Webb had come prepared for war. Your Honor, he began, laying out several thick folders on the conference table. My client is a grieving grandmother who has been falsely accused of harming her beloved grandson. These charges are the result of a mentally unstable daughter seeking to blame others for her own parental failures. Sarah shot me a warning look as Webb continued his opening salvo. We have extensive documentation showing that Mrs. Janice Thompson has been struggling with depression, anxiety, and possible substance abuse issues for several months. Her erratic behavior and inability to provide stable supervision for her son directly contributed to this tragic accident. He opened the first folder and pulled out what appeared to be medical records. These documents show that Mrs. Thompson has been prescribed anti-anxiety medication and sleep aids, indicating serious mental health struggles that have impacted her parenting abilities. I stared at the papers in shock. Those were my private medical records from my family doctor, documenting the stress-related symptoms I'd been experiencing over the past few months. How had Patricia obtained confidential medical information? Sarah immediately objected. Your Honor, those records were obtained illegally. My client's medical privacy has been violated, and these documents should not be admissible in any proceedings. Judge Martinez examined the paperwork with a frown. Mr. Webb, how did your client obtain private medical records? My client has been acting as Mrs. Thompson's healthcare proxy due to her increasing mental instability. She had legal authority to access these records in her capacity as emergency contact and financial supporter. That's completely false, I said, my voice rising, despite Sarah's restraining hand on my arm. I never appointed Patricia as my healthcare proxy. She has no legal authority to access my medical information. Webb smiled coldly. We have signed documentation to the contrary. He produced another document that made my blood run cold. It appeared to be a healthcare proxy form with my signature dated 6 months ago and notarized by Patricia's neighbor, Mrs. Henderson. I never signed that document, I said firmly. That's not my signature. Sarah examined the paperwork closely. Your Honor, this appears to be a forged document. We request immediate forensic analysis of the signature and notarization. Well, furthermore, Webb continued ignoring the forgery accusation. We have recorded evidence of Mrs. Thompson's increasing paranoia and hostility toward family members who have been trying to help her. He produced a digital recorder and played what sounded like my voice, saying terrible things about Patricia and Madison. But as I listened, I realized the audio had been edited together from multiple phone conversations, creating statements I'd never actually made. She's been secretly recording my phone calls, I whispered to Sarah in horror. Sarah stood up. Your Honor, this evidence is clearly fabricated. The audio has obviously been edited and manipulated. We object to its admissibility and request technical analysis to prove tampering. Judge Martinez was looking increasingly uncomfortable with Webb's tactics. Mr. Webb, these evidentiary standards are highly questionable. Do you have any legitimate documentation to support your claims? We have witness statements from multiple family members documenting Mrs. Thompson's erratic behavior and threats against my client. He handed over a stack of affidavits signed by Uncle Robert, Aunt Susan, and several people I didn't recognize. The statements painted a picture of me as an unstable, paranoid woman who had threatened Patricia and blamed her for my own parenting failures. Those people barely know me, I told Sarah, and I've never threatened Patricia or anyone else. Sarah reviewed the affidavits quickly. Your Honor, these witness statements are clearly coordinated and appear to have been written by the same person. The language patterns and specific phrases are identical across multiple supposed witnesses. Additionally, Webb continued, my client has a documentation showing that she has been financially supporting Mrs. Thompson for years out of genuine concern for her grandson's welfare. Without this support, the child would have been living in poverty. The financial manipulation was being reframed as charitable assistance. Patricia's theft of Danny's child support and benefits was being presented as generous family support that I was now ungratefully rejecting. Judge Martinez had heard enough. Mr. Webb, while I appreciate your zealous advocacy for your client, the evidence you've presented raises serious questions about document forgery, illegal surveillance, and witness coordination. I'm inclined to grant the protective order based on the medical evidence of the child's injuries alone. Webb's expression hardened. Your Honor, we intend to file countercharges against Mrs. Thompson for child endangerment, false reporting, and defamation of my client's character. This is clearly a case of parental alienation designed to cover up Mrs. Thompson's own negligence. What countercharges? Sarah demanded. Mrs. Thompson has been working excessive hours, leaving her son unsupervised for extended periods. She has been exposing him to inappropriate adult situations, including romantic relationships with unsuitable men. And she has been coaching him to make false statements about his grandmother to avoid taking responsibility for her own parenting failures. Each accusation was a twisted version of reality. My work schedule was necessary to support Danny. I hadn't dated anyone since my divorce 3 years ago, and I certainly hadn't coached Danny to lie about anything. But Webb was skilled at taking real situations and spinning them to support his narrative. My long work hours became evidence of neglect. My lack of dating became evidence of social isolation and mental instability. Danny's truthful statements about his injuries became evidence of parental manipulation. Judge Martinez granted my petition for a temporary protective order, but Webb had succeeded in muddying the waters. The hearing that should have been a straightforward protection matter had become a complex battle over my fitness as a parent. This is just the beginning, Webb told Sarah as we left the courtroom. My client has extensive resources and documentation going back years. We'll prove that Mrs. Thompson is an unfit mother who has been neglecting her son's needs and using him as a weapon against his loving grandmother. After Webb left, Sarah and I sat in her car reviewing what had just happened. He's good, Sarah admitted grimly. Unethical, but good. He's taken Patricia's years of manipulation and documentation and turned it into a legal strategy that puts you on the defensive. Can he really challenge my custody of Danny? He can try, but the medical evidence and Danny's statements about being pushed are powerful. The problem is that family court judges see parental alienation cases regularly, and Webb is skilled at presenting manipulative parents as victims. What do? We fight back with truth and evidence. The forensic analysis of those forged documents will help. The technical analysis of the audio recordings will show manipulation. And we have witnesses of our own who can testify about Patricia's behavior and your parenting. Sarah started the car and looked at me seriously. Janice, I need you to understand that this is going to get worse before it gets better. Webb will attack every aspect of your life, your character, your mental health, your parenting decisions. He'll try to make you doubt yourself and your memory of events. How do I handle that? You remember that truth is on your side. Patricia hurt Danny and has been stealing from your family for years. Those are facts, not opinions. And no amount of legal maneuvering can change the medical evidence or Danny's testimony. As we drove back to the hospital, I realized that the legal battle was just beginning. Patricia and Webb would use every resource available to discredit me and maintain control over the narrative. But for the first time in years, I wasn't facing this fight alone. I had Sarah's legal expertise, community support, and most importantly, I had the truth about what had really been happening to my family. Webb could manipulate documents and coach witnesses, but he couldn't change the fact that Danny had been pushed down those stairs or that Patricia had been systematically stealing from us for years. The truth would prevail, but it was going to be a much harder fight than I'd anticipated. Wednesday morning brought the breakthrough we'd been hoping for. Danny woke up with clearer eyes and stronger voice, asking for water and wondering why his father was asleep in the uncomfortable hospital chair beside his bed. Marcus had arrived late Tuesday night and hadn't left Danny's side since. Watching them together now, Marcus reading softly from one of Danny's favorite books while my son listened with wide-eyed attention, I felt a mixture of joy and grief for all the time they'd lost. "Mom, why didn't you tell me Dad was coming to visit?" Danny asked when he noticed me standing in the doorway. "It was a surprise, sweetheart. Your dad has missed you very much and he wanted to be here while you're getting better." Danny looked confused. "But Grandma Patricia said Dad didn't want to see me anymore because I was too much trouble." Marcus and I exchanged a glance over Danny's head. "Danny, that wasn't true. I've wanted to see you every day since you were little. There was some confusion about letters and phone calls, but I never stopped wanting to be your dad. You sent letters every month for 3 years. Birthday cards, Christmas presents, pictures from California. I thought maybe you weren't ready to write back yet, but I never stopped trying." Danny's face scrunched up in concentration. "Grandma said you moved far away because you didn't want to live near us anymore." "I moved for work, but I always hoped you and your mom would visit me or that I could come visit you. I never wanted to be away from you permanently." Dr. Harrison arrived for morning rounds and was pleased with Danny's alertness and responsiveness. "Danny, your brain is healing very well. Can you remember more about what happened at your grandmother's house?" Danny's expression grew serious, and he looked at me for reassurance. "Am I in trouble if I tell the truth?" "You're never in trouble for telling the truth, sweetheart. The truth helps people understand what really happened so they can keep you safe." Grandma Patricia was decorating for Aunt Madison's party. She had lots of pretty things on tables in the living room and basement. She told me to be very careful and not touch anything. Dr. Harrison listened patiently as Danny continued his account. "I was trying to help carry some silver things downstairs, but the box was heavy and I bumped into a table. A really expensive vase fell and broke into pieces." "What happened after the vase broke?" "Grandma got really, really angry, angrier than I'd ever seen anyone get. She screamed that I was clumsy and stupid and that I'd ruined everything. She said the vase cost more money than my mom made in a month." Marcus reached over and took Danny's hand. "What did she do then?" "She grabbed my arm really tight and shook me. It hurt a lot. She said I needed to learn to be more careful around expensive things. Then she pushed me toward the stairs and said maybe falling down would teach me a lesson." The room was silent except for the sound of machines monitoring Danny's recovery. Dr. Harrison made notes on his tablet while Marcus and I struggled to maintain composure. "I tried to catch myself on the railing, but it was loose. I fell all the way down to the bottom and hit my head on the concrete floor. Everything went dark, and when I woke up, I was here." "Danny, did your grandmother check on you after you fell?" Dr. Harrison asked. "I don't remember her coming downstairs right away. When I woke up a little bit, I could hear her upstairs cleaning up the broken vase and moving things around. She was talking to herself about how to explain what happened." "Do you remember what she said?" "Something about how accidents happen when children don't listen to instructions, and that maybe this would help me grow up and be more responsible." Dr. Harrison finished his notes and looked at me seriously. Mrs. Thompson, Danny's account is consistent with the medical evidence and the timeline discrepancies we identified. This clearly wasn't an accident. After the doctor left, Danny looked between Marcus and me with worried eyes. Are you mad at me for telling about Grandma? Oh, sweetheart, no. We're not mad at you at all. You were very brave to tell the truth even though it was scary. But Grandma said families should protect each other's secrets. She said telling outsiders family business was disloyal. Marcus leaned forward. Danny, real families protect each other from harm. They don't ask family members to keep secrets about being hurt. There's a difference between privacy and secrets. I added, privacy is about keeping good things special between family members. Secrets about being hurt are different. Those secrets can be dangerous. Danny was quiet for a moment, processing this distinction. Grandma made me keep lots of secrets. What kinds of secrets? I asked gently. About the money she got in the mail with my name on it. She said it was for helping take care of me, but that you didn't need to know about it because it would make you feel bad. Oh, what else? About Dad's letters. She showed them to me sometimes, but she said they would make you sad because Dad was telling lies about wanting to see me. She said it was kinder not to tell you. Marcus closed his eyes, pain evident on his face. Danny, those letters weren't lies. Every word I wrote was true. She also made me promise not to tell you about the time she got really angry at me. She said you already had too much stress from work and knowing about our little problems would make you sick. The systematic nature of Patricia's manipulation was stunning. She'd convinced an 8-year-old boy that protecting his mother meant hiding abuse and keeping his father's love a secret. Danny, none of those things were your responsibility to handle. Adults should never ask children to keep secrets about money letters from parents or about being hurt or scared. But she said I was mature for my age and that I could handle grown-up responsibilities. Being mature doesn't mean you should have to handle adult problems. You're 8 years old. Your job is to be safe, learn new things, play with friends, and tell trusted adults when something doesn't feel right. Danny thought about this for a while, then asked quietly, Is Grandma in trouble because I told the truth? Grandma is in trouble because she made bad choices that hurt you. The truth didn't get her in trouble, her actions did. Will I have to see her again? Not unless you want to, and only if it's safe. Your safety is the most important thing to your dad and me. What if she says she's sorry? Marcus answered this one. Danny, when someone hurts a child, saying sorry isn't enough to make it safe to be around them again. Sorry has to be followed by big changes in behavior and proving that they've learned better ways to handle anger. Grandma would have to show doctors and judges and other grown-ups that she learned how to be safe around children. That takes a very long time, and it doesn't always work. Danny nodded solemnly. I don't want to be scared anymore. You don't have to be scared. Dad and I are going to make sure you're always safe. A knock interrupted our conversation. Detective Williams and Carol Thompson had arrived with some updates about the investigation. Danny, you look much better today, Detective Williams said kindly. We're very proud of you for being so brave and telling the truth about what happened. Are you going to arrest Grandma? She's already been arrested for hurting you. Now we're working on making sure she faces appropriate consequences for her actions. Carol Thompson sat down beside Danny's bed. We also wanted to tell you that we found some things at your grandmother's house that belong to you and your family. What kinds of things? Letters and cards from your dad that were supposed to be given to you, money that was supposed to help your mom take care of you, and some other important papers that will help make sure you and your mom have everything you need. Can I read Dad's letters? Marcus smiled. I brought copies of all of them with me. When you're feeling stronger, we can read them together. Detective Williams added, we also found evidence that your grandmother was doing the same kinds of hurtful things to other families. Your bravery in telling the truth has helped protect other children too. Danny's eyes widened. Really? Really, sometimes when one person is brave enough to tell the truth, it helps lots of other people find their courage too. After the investigators left, Danny curled up between Marcus and me, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him since the accident. Mom, I'm glad Dad is here, and I'm glad I don't have to keep secrets anymore. We're glad too, sweetheart. From now on, our family is going to be honest with each other about everything important. Even scary things, especially scary things, because when we share scary things with people who love us, they become less scary. Danny fell asleep holding both our hands, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt genuinely hopeful about our future. He was healing physically and emotionally. The truth about Patricia's abuse and manipulation was finally being acknowledged. And most importantly, Danny was learning that real family relationships are built on trust, honesty, and protection, not secrets, control, and fear. Thursday brought an escalation in Patricia's behavior that no one had anticipated. Despite the restraining order and her pending criminal charges, she wasn't accepting defeat gracefully. It started at 6 in the morning when hospital security called me to report that Patricia had been found in the parking garage attempting to access the building through a maintenance entrance. When confronted by security guards, she'd claimed to be a volunteer bringing comfort items to pediatric patients. She had a bag full of what appeared to be children's books and stuffed animals. Security Chief Ramon Martinez explained when he called me with the update. But when we examined the items, we found recording devices hidden inside several of the toys. Recording devices. Small digital recorders probably intended to capture private conversations in Danny's room. We've turned everything over to the police as evidence of stalking and violation of the restraining order. The sophistication of Patricia's planning was both impressive and terrifying. Even facing criminal charges, she was still trying to gather evidence to support her version of events. An hour later, my phone started buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. When I finally answered one expecting it to be a reporter or court official, I heard Patricia's voice. "Janice, this has gone far enough. You're destroying this family with your lies and manipulation." "Mom, you're not supposed to be contacting me. There's a restraining order." That order is based on false information provided by a confused child. Danny doesn't understand what he's saying because of his head injury. "Patricia, you need to stop calling me. Every conversation is being recorded by the police." "Let them record. I want everyone to hear the truth about what kind of daughter abandons her mother and destroys her family for money." The call ended abruptly, but within minutes, my phone rang again from a different number. "You think you've won something, but you have no idea what you've set in motion. I have evidence going back years that proves you're an unfit mother." Sarah had advised me to document all contact attempts, so I started recording the subsequent calls. In each conversation, Patricia's story became more elaborate and her threats more specific. "I've been keeping detailed records of your neglect and emotional instability. Danny's accident was the inevitable result of your poor supervision and parenting choices. The school has a documentation of your failure to attend parent conferences and school events because you're too busy working to care about Danny's education. I have medical professionals who will testify that your mental health issues pose a danger to Danny's well-being." Each claim contained just enough truth to be convincing to someone who didn't know the full context. I had missed some school events because of work schedules. I had been taking anti-anxiety medication. But Patricia was twisting normal single-parent challenges into evidence of unfitness. The calls continued throughout the morning, coming from different phone numbers every time. Patricia was clearly using multiple devices or services to circumvent call blocking. Her desperation was evident in the increasingly wild claims she made. "I know about your drinking problem. I have photographs of empty wine bottles in your trash cans. I have recordings of you screaming at Danny when you thought no one could hear. I have bank records showing that you've been stealing money from Danny's college fund to pay for unnecessary personal expenses." None of these claims were true, but they revealed how extensively Patricia had been spying on our lives. She'd apparently been going through our garbage, attempting to record private conversations and monitoring our financial activity. Around noon, the harassment escalated beyond phone calls. Patricia showed up at St. Augustine's Academy, demanding to speak with Principal Martinez about Danny's situation at home. When school administrators refused to meet with her because of the restraining order, she began loudly discussing my alleged unfitness as a parent in the school lobby where other parents could overhear. Mrs. Rodriguez called to warn me about the incident. She was here for about 20 minutes before we could get her to leave. She told several parents that Danny had been injured because of neglect at home and that the family was trying to cover up your responsibility for his injuries. What did you tell the other parents? Principal Martinez made an announcement that the school doesn't comment on family legal matters and that parents should be cautious about spreading unverified information about students' families. Most people understood, but Patricia's visit definitely created buzz among the parent community. The damage to my reputation was part of Patricia's strategy. Even if the criminal charges against her resulted in conviction, she was trying to destroy my standing in the community so thoroughly that rebuilding my life would be nearly impossible. By afternoon, Patricia had moved to social media. She'd created new Facebook and Twitter accounts using slight variations of her name and began posting detailed accusations against me as Danny's mother. Sarah showed me the posts when she arrived at the hospital for our daily legal update. She's claiming that Danny's injuries were the result of domestic violence in your home, that you've been dating abusive men who pose a danger to your son. I haven't dated anyone since my divorce. She's also claiming that you've been embezzling money from your employer and using drugs obtained illegally from your medical workplace. The posts included photographs, some clearly taken without my knowledge, that had been edited to support her narrative. A picture of me looking exhausted after a double shift was captioned as evidence of drug use. A photo of normal household items in my garbage was presented as evidence of drinking problems. Can we get these posts removed? I'm working on it, but social media companies are slow to respond to defamation claims. The damage may already be done in terms of public perception. Sarah's phone rang and her expression grew grim as she listened to the caller. That was Detective Williams. Patricia was arrested an hour ago for violating the restraining order, but there's been a complication. What kind of complication? She's claiming that she needs psychiatric evaluation because she's been driven to desperate behavior by grief over losing access to her beloved grandson. Franklin Webb is arguing that her actions today are evidence of a grandmother's love, not criminal stalking. Can he really spin stalking and harassment as grandmotherly concern? He's good at manipulating narratives, and Patricia is smart enough to present herself as the victim, even while she's actively harassing you. The hospital social worker Angela Martinez joined our conversation with disturbing news about Patricia's latest tactics. She's been contacting other families in the pediatric unit, telling them that hospital staff can't be trusted to protect children from abusive parents. She's trying to create fear and suspicion among families who are already dealing with medical crises. How is she accessing other families? She's been posing as a hospital volunteer and approaching families in waiting areas and the cafeteria. She tells them that she's a grandmother whose family is trying to cover up child abuse, and that the hospital administration is complicit in allowing dangerous parents access to vulnerable children. The manipulation was expanding beyond our family to include other patients and families. Patricia was trying to create chaos and distrust within the hospital community as part of her campaign against me. We've banned her from all hospital properties and increased security monitoring, but she's persistent and creative in finding ways to circumvent restrictions. As evening approached, I realized that Patricia's desperation was making her increasingly dangerous. her willingness to violate court orders, harass other families, and spread false information suggested that she might escalate to even more serious actions if she felt cornered. Sarah arranged for additional security measures, including monitoring of my apartment complex and coordination with local police for a rapid response if Patricia appeared at locations where Danny and I might be vulnerable. Janice, I need you to understand that Patricia's behavior today shows that she's not accepting the reality of her situation. People who feel they have nothing left to lose sometimes make very poor decisions. You think she might try to hurt us? I think she's demonstrated that she's willing to violate court orders and engage in systematic harassment. That suggests she might be capable of other serious actions if she believes her back is against the wall. As Danny slept peacefully in his hospital bed, surrounded by cards from classmates and gifts from community members, I realized that Patricia's desperate behavior was actually strengthening our legal case. Every violation of the restraining order, every recorded threat, every incident of harassment was being documented as evidence of her instability and danger to our family. But knowing that her desperation would ultimately help our legal position didn't make the immediate threat any less frightening. Patricia had spent years perfecting her manipulation and control tactics, and now that those tactics were failing, she was revealing the true extent of her willingness to harm anyone who defied her authority. Friday afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to Danny's hospital room. Madison stood hesitantly in the doorway, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and her eyes were red from crying. Janice, I know you said you didn't want to see me, but I need to talk to you. Please. I looked at Danny, who was coloring in a new book Marcus had brought him then at Madison's desperate expression. Danny, your Aunt Madison is here. Do you want to say hello? Danny looked up from his crayons and studied Madison's face. Are you going to yell at Mom like Grandma does? Madison's face crumpled. No, sweetheart. I came to apologize to both of you. I stepped into the hallway with Madison leaving the door open so I could keep an eye on Danny. What do you want, Madison? I want to tell you everything, all of it, and I want to help you stop Mom before she hurts anyone else. It's a little late for that, don't you think? Madison pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages from Patricia that had been sent since her arrest. The messages were increasingly unhinged, full of threats and demands that Madison support her version of events. She's been texting me constantly since Wednesday night. Look at this one from this morning. The message read, if you betray me after everything I've done for this family, I'll make sure you lose everything, just like your sister. I have evidence of your cooperation with the tax fraud that will destroy your career and your marriage. Madison, she's been manipulating you the same way she manipulated me. I know, but I was so scared of losing the inheritance of having my financial security destroyed that I convinced myself her version of events was true. Madison wiped her eyes. When I heard about her behavior at the hospital and the school, I realized she's not the person I thought she was. What changed your mind? Madison pulled up another text message. This one came last night. The message was chilling. Danny would be better off if his accident had been fatal. One less witness to worry about, and Janice would be too devastated to cause problems for the family. I felt sick reading Patricia's words. She wrote that about her own grandson. There's more. She's been asking me to help her gain access to the hospital. She wants me to bring her visitor badges or help her get past security. She has some kind of plan to resolve the Danny situation permanently. What does that mean? I think she wants to hurt him again. Maybe worse this time. Madison handed me her phone. I've been recording all our conversations for the past 2 days. I have hours of audio where she admits to pushing. Danny discusses the financial fraud and talks about ways to eliminate witnesses to her crimes. You've been secretly recording your own mother. I've been protecting myself and gathering evidence. After what happened to Danny, I realized that Mom is capable of anything if she feels threatened enough. I scrolled through the audio files on Madison's phone. There were dozens of recordings, some as long as 30 minutes. Janice, there's something else you need to know. The inheritance money. It's not just Dad's life insurance. Mom has been systematically stealing from elderly clients at the law firm where she worked before retirement. What? She was a bookkeeper for Henderson Martinez and Associates. They handled estate planning for elderly clients. Over 15 years, she embezzled nearly $500,000 from client trust accounts. The scope of Patricia's criminal activity was staggering. How do you know this? Because she's been using some of that money to fund our family's lifestyle. The vacation cabin, the rental properties, the monthly payments to you, it's all financed with stolen money. Madison explained that Patricia had been careful to target clients who had no close family members to monitor their accounts. She'd made small withdrawals over long periods, doctoring paperwork to hide the thefts. The law firm never discovered the missing money because she was responsible for reconciling the accounts. She covered her tracks by creating false documentation and blaming discrepancies on computer errors. Why are you telling me this now? Because I realized that everything Mom told me about protecting family wealth was a lie. There is no legitimate family wealth to protect. Everything we have is stolen money, and she's been using it to control all of us. Madison showed me bank statements and financial documents she'd copied from Patricia's home office. She's been living off stolen money while making you feel grateful for her sacrificial support. The monthly payments to you were a fraction of what she was stealing from elderly clients. Did you participate in the law firm thefts? No, I didn't know about them until this week, but I've been benefiting from stolen money without knowing it, and that makes me complicit. Madison explained that she'd discovered the financial fraud when she'd gone to Patricia's house to retrieve some personal belongings while Patricia was in jail. I found boxes of financial records hidden in her bedroom closet. Bank statements, client account information, forged documents, and records of all the money she's been moving around to avoid detection. Have you contacted the law firm? I called them yesterday. They're conducting an internal audit now, and they'll likely be filing criminal charges within days. The revelation meant that Patricia was facing not just local charges for child abuse and benefit fraud, but federal charges for embezzlement and money laundering. Her legal troubles were escalating far beyond what any of us had anticipated. There's one more thing, Madison said quietly. I found a journal where she's been documenting her plans for dealing with family members who become problems for her operations. What kind of plans? Madison showed me photographs she'd taken of handwritten journal pages. Patricia had been keeping detailed notes about ways to discredit me, remove Danny from my custody, and eliminate anyone who might expose her financial crimes. One entry dated 3 weeks before Danny's accident read, "Janice is becoming suspicious about the monthly payments. May need to accelerate timeline for custody transfer. Danny could provide leverage if properly managed." Another entry dated the day before the accident was even more chilling. Weekend party preparation provides opportunity to address Danny's situation. Accidents happen when children don't follow safety instructions. She was planning to hurt Danny. I think she was planning to create a situation where he would be injured, and you would be blamed for inadequate supervision. The party preparation was just cover for getting him alone in a dangerous environment. The premeditation evident in Patricia's journal transformed the assault charge into potential attempted murder. Sarah would need to see these documents immediately. Madison, why didn't you find this evidence sooner? Because I was too scared to look closely at Mom's business. I accepted her explanations about everything without asking questions, because I didn't want to discover anything that would threaten my financial security. Madison's voice broke as she continued. I let my fear of losing money override my responsibility to protect Danny. I knew Mom was controlling and manipulative, but I convinced myself that she genuinely loved us and was trying to help. What changed? Seeing Danny in this hospital bed with bruises from her hands. hearing her talk about him like he was a problem to be solved rather than a child to be protected, realizing that she's been stealing from elderly people who trusted her to manage their life savings. Madison looked through the hospital room window at Danny, who was showing Marcus his latest coloring creation. "I want to make this right, Janice. I want to help you ensure that Mom faces consequences for everything she's done, and I want to help protect Danny from any future threats." "What are you willing to do?" "Whatever it takes. Testify in court, provide financial records, help law enforcement recover stolen money, cooperate with federal investigators. I'll give up any claim to inheritance money because I now know it's all stolen anyway." I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation or self-interest. What I saw was genuine remorse and determination to finally do the right thing. "Madison, if you help us with this, Patricia will try to destroy you financially and legally. Are you prepared for that?" "She's already threatening to destroy me if I don't help her. At least this way I'm choosing to be destroyed for the right reasons, instead of being destroyed for continuing to enable her crimes." "And Jason, how does your husband feel about all this?" "Jason is horrified. He never knew where our financial cushion was coming from, and he's insisted that we cooperate fully with investigators, even if it means losing everything we thought we had." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like my sister was being completely honest with me. Fear had made her complicit in Patricia's schemes, but genuine horror at the extent of those schemes had finally motivated her to choose family loyalty over financial security. "Okay, Madison, we'll work together to stop her, but I need you to understand that this changes our relationship permanently. Trust has to be earned back, not just declared." "I understand. I don't expect forgiveness immediately, but I hope someday you and Danny can see me as someone who chose to do the right thing when it really mattered." As we rejoined Danny and Marcus in the hospital room, I realized that Madison's redemption might be the key to ensuring Patricia faced full accountability for years of crimes. With Madison's evidence and testimony, law enforcement would have a complete picture of Patricia's criminal enterprise and her escalating danger to anyone who threatened her control. Patricia had spent years dividing our family through manipulation and fear, but her desperation was finally bringing the truth to light and giving us a chance to rebuild our relationships on a foundation of honesty rather than secrecy. Monday morning brought the news we'd been waiting for. Detective Williams called at 8 o'clock to inform us that a federal grand jury had voted to indict Patricia on 17 felony counts, including embezzlement money, laundering tax fraud, child endangerment, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The investigation moved quickly once Madison provided the financial records and journal entries, he explained. The U.S. Attorney's Office has classified this as a major white-collar crime with aggravated circumstances due to the child abuse component. The charges carried a potential sentence of 25 to 30 years in federal prison. At 68 years old, Patricia was facing the possibility of spending the rest of her life behind bars. "There's more," Detective Williams continued. "The investigation has uncovered similar schemes in 3 other counties. Patricia has been running elaborate financial fraud operations involving at least 8 families over the past 12 years. The scope of her criminal enterprise was staggering. Patricia had perfected a system of targeting vulnerable single parents, offering financial assistance that came with strings attached, then systematically stealing government benefits while maintaining control over her victims through dependence and manipulation. The total amount stolen from government agencies' employer trust accounts and family members exceeds $1.2 million over 12 years. Sarah arrived at the hospital with copies of the federal indictment and additional news about the civil proceedings. "The court has awarded you temporary custody of all assets recovered from Patricia's various fraud schemes," she announced. "Her properties are being liquidated to provide restitution to victims, but as the primary victim, you'll likely receive significant compensation." How much money are we talking about? Conservatively, after attorney fees and court costs, probably around $400,000, enough to ensure Danny's college education is fully funded and to provide you with genuine financial independence. The irony wasn't lost on me that Patricia's theft had actually created more financial security for Danny than we would have had if she'd never interfered in our lives. Marcus had been working with a family therapist to help Danny understand the legal proceedings in age-appropriate terms. Danny knows that his grandmother made very bad choices that hurt him and other families, and that she's going to face consequences for those choices. How is he handling it? Better than we expected. Dr. Sarah Chen, the child psychologist, not your lawyer, says children often feel relieved when adults finally acknowledge that abuse happened and take steps to prevent it from continuing. Danny had been making remarkable progress in his physical recovery. The doctors were optimistic that he'd be discharged by Wednesday with follow-up appointments, but no lasting neurological damage. The emotional recovery was more complex, but Danny was beginning to understand that he hadn't been responsible for protecting family secrets or managing adult problems. He asked me yesterday if he would have to visit Patricia in prison, Marcus said. I told him that would be his choice when he's old enough to make that decision, but that right now, our job is to focus on helping him feel safe and happy. Tuesday brought Patricia's arraignment in federal court. Sarah and I attended to provide victim impact statements and to demonstrate community support for prosecution. Patricia appeared in court wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking older and more frail than I'd ever seen her. Franklin Webb had been replaced by a federal public defender after Patricia's assets were frozen for restitution purposes. Her new attorney attempted to negotiate a plea agreement that would reduce the charges in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations into other similar schemes. Your Honor, my client is a 68-year-old woman with no prior criminal record who became involved in financial irregularities due to family pressures and mental health issues exacerbated by grief over her husband's death. The federal prosecutor assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Santos wasn't interested in significant concessions. Your Honor, the defendant operated a sophisticated criminal enterprise for over a decade targeting vulnerable families and elderly clients. The child abuse component and evidence of premeditation make this case particularly serious. Judge Catherine Morrison reviewed the evidence and Patricia's journal entries before making her decision. Mrs. Patricia Davis Thompson, the court finds that you pose a significant flight risk and danger to community members, particularly family members who have cooperated with this investigation. Bail is denied. You will remain in federal custody pending trial. Patricia's expression never changed during the proceedings, but when she looked across the courtroom at me, her eyes held a coldness that sent chills down my spine. Even facing decades in prison, she showed no remorse for hurting Danny or destroying our family's financial security. After court, Maria Santos met with Sarah and me to discuss the timeline for prosecution. We're prepared to offer a plea agreement for 15 years in federal prison if Patricia pleads guilty to the major charges and provides full cooperation with victim restitution. Given her age, 15 years is effectively a life sentence. What if she refuses the plea agreement? Then we go to trial and she faces the possibility of 30 years. With the evidence we have, including her own journal entries and recorded admissions, conviction is virtually certain. Sarah advised me that accepting a plea agreement would be faster and less traumatic for Danny than enduring a lengthy trial where he might need to testify about the abuse. The important thing is that Patricia faces significant consequences and that you and Danny get the resources you need to rebuild your lives. Wednesday afternoon brought unexpected visitors to Danny's hospital room. Henderson Martinez and Associates, the law firm where Patricia had worked, sent a delegation led by senior partner James Martinez. Mrs. Thompson, we wanted to apologize personally for our firm's failure to detect Patricia's embezzlement. We also wanted to discuss additional restitution beyond what the federal case will provide. The law firm was facing potential liability for their inadequate oversight of client trust accounts. They were offering a settlement that would provide additional financial security for Danny's future. Our malpractice insurance will cover $200,000 in additional compensation, and the firm is establishing an educational trust fund for Danny that will cover all expenses from elementary school through graduate school. The total financial recovery meant that Danny would never have to worry about educational costs, and I would have enough resources to reduce my working hours to spend more time with him during his childhood. Thursday brought Patricia's decision on the plea agreement. She accepted the 15-year sentence in exchange for pleading guilty to the major charges and cooperating with victim restitution. She'll be eligible for parole after serving 12 years, but given her age and the seriousness of the charges, it's unlikely she'll ever be released, Maria Santos explained. The plea agreement also included permanent restraining orders, preventing Patricia from having any contact with Danny or me even after her eventual release from prison. The court will also require her to participate in psychological counseling and anger management programs while incarcerated, though, given the sophistication of her criminal behavior, the prospects for genuine rehabilitation are limited. Danny was officially discharged from the hospital Thursday evening. As we gathered his flowers, cards, and gifts from community members, I reflected on how dramatically our lives had changed in just 1 week. 7 days ago, I'd been a financially dependent single mother, living in fear of displeasing Patricia and losing her support. Now, I was a financially independent woman with full custody of my son, a renewed relationship with his father, and a community of people who genuinely cared about our well-being. Mom, are we going to be okay now? Danny asked as we packed his belongings. Yes, sweetheart, we're gonna be better than okay. We're gonna be safe and happy and honest with each other about everything important. Marcus had decided to relocate from California to be closer to Danny. I've missed too much of his childhood already. I want to be the father he deserves, and I want to help you provide him with the stability he needs. As we left the hospital together, Danny walking carefully but steadily, Marcus carrying the gift bags, and me holding my son's hand, I realized that Patricia's attempt to destroy our family had actually given us the opportunity to rebuild it stronger than it had ever been. Justice had been served, but more importantly, truth had been revealed and healing had begun. 6 months later, our new life had taken shape in ways I never could have imagined during those terrifying days in the ICU. Danny was thriving in his new school. Marcus had moved to an apartment 10 minutes away, and I'd been able to reduce my working hours to spend more time focused on being a mother, rather than just surviving financially. The house we'd purchased with the restitution money was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet neighborhood with good schools and friendly neighbors. Danny had his own room decorated with posters of his favorite superheroes and filled with books that Marcus brought during his twice-weekly visits. My mom and dad come to my school science fair next Friday, Danny asked over breakfast on a sunny spring morning. I want him to see the volcano project we built together. Of course he can come. We're all very proud of your hard work on that project. The relationship between Marcus and me had evolved into something we called collaborative co-parenting. We weren't romantic partners, but we'd learned to work together effectively to provide Danny with consistent love and support from both parents. Your dad will be here this afternoon for your therapy session with Dr. Chen, and then we're all going to the baseball game, remember? Danny's therapy sessions had been crucial in helping him process the trauma of Patricia's abuse and learn healthy ways to express emotions and concerns. Dr. Sarah Chen had become an important part of our support team, helping Danny understand that the abuse hadn't been his fault and teaching him skills for recognizing and reporting unsafe situations. Yeah, I like Dr. Chen because she doesn't make me feel weird about being scared sometimes, Danny had told me after his third session. She says it's normal for people to feel scared after bad things happen and that talking about scary feelings makes them smaller. The community response to our situation had been overwhelming in the best possible way. St. Augustine's Academy had implemented new policies for background checks on family members who had access to students, and several other schools in the district had adopted similar safety measures. Mrs. Rodriguez had become not just Danny's teacher, but a genuine friend to our family. Danny's resilience has been remarkable to watch, she told me during our most recent parent conference. He's become something of a leader among his classmates, helping other children understand that it's okay to ask for help when adults make them feel uncomfortable. My workplace had also adapted to support our new circumstances. Dr. Foster had helped me transition to a position that required fewer night shifts and less overtime, allowing me to maintain our financial stability while being present for Danny's school events and activities. Single parents in healthcare face unique challenges, Dr. Foster had explained when she'd offered me the new position. Supporting our staff through family crises ultimately makes us a stronger medical team. The financial independence that came from the restitution money had transformed our daily life in profound ways. Instead of constantly worrying about rent utilities and Danny's school expenses, I could focus on making decisions based on what was best for our family's emotional well-being. It's amazing how much mental energy was tied up in financial anxiety, I told Sarah during one of our monthly coffee meetings. Now I can think clearly about parenting decisions instead of constantly calculating costs. Sarah had become more than our attorney. She'd become a close friend whose own children had become Danny's playmates. You've handled this entire situation with grace and strength that I'm not sure I would have possessed, she'd told me recently. Watching you rebuild your life has been inspiring for everyone who knows you. Madison's journey toward redemption had been more complicated but ultimately successful. She'd testified in 3 separate cases against Patricia, helping prosecutors understand the full scope of the criminal enterprise. The process had cost her financially. She'd lost the house and most of her savings when Patricia's stolen money was recovered, but it had also freed her from the psychological manipulation that had controlled her decisions for years. I'm rebuilding my life on honest work and real relationships, she'd told me during our first dinner together since Danny's hospitalization. It's scary to start over at 30, but it's better than living off stolen money and lies. Madison and Jason had moved to a smaller apartment and were both working full-time to rebuild their financial foundation, but they seemed happier and more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. Letting go of the expectation of inherited money has actually been liberating, Madison explained. We're making decisions based on our own values, instead of constantly trying to please Mom to protect our financial future. Danny had been cautious about rebuilding a relationship with Madison, but with Dr. Chen's guidance, he'd gradually become comfortable spending time with her again. Aunt Madison made bad choices because she was scared, but she's learning to make better choices now, he'd explained to me after their first supervised visit. Dr. Chen says people can change if they really want to, and if they get help learning how. Marcus's transition back into fatherhood had been smoother than any of us had expected. He'd immediately enrolled in a parenting class for divorced fathers, and had worked with a therapist to understand how to rebuild trust with a child who'd been told lies about his father's feelings. I lost 3 years of Danny's childhood because I trusted Patricia to facilitate our relationship instead of insisting on direct communication. He'd admitted during one of our co-parenting discussions, "I won't make that mistake again." Marcus had also been instrumental in helping Danny understand that divorce doesn't mean parents stop loving their children, and that sometimes families work better when parents live in different houses, but continue cooperating to raise their children. Some families look like mom and dad and kids all living together, and some families look like mom in one house and dad in another house, but everyone's still taking care of each other. Danny had explained to a classmate whose parents were getting divorced. Both kinds can be good families as long as the grown-ups put the kids first. The legal proceedings had concluded with Patricia being sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. She'd made no attempt to contact us since her incarceration, which Dr. Chen said was probably beneficial for Danny's healing process. Children need to see that adults face real consequences for harmful behavior, Dr. Chen had explained. Patricia's absence allows Danny to process the trauma without ongoing fear that she might return to hurt him again. The federal investigation had ultimately identified 12 families who'd been victimized by Patricia's various schemes over the years. The recovery of stolen funds had provided restitution to most of the victims, and several families had reached out to express gratitude for our courage in reporting the abuse. Your decision to prioritize Danny's safety over family loyalty prevented Patricia from harming other children. One mother had written in a letter that arrived 3 months after Patricia's sentencing. My son is safe now because you were brave enough to tell the truth about what happened. As spring turned towards summer, I found myself reflecting on the profound changes that had occurred in our lives. What had begun as a nightmare of child abuse and financial fraud had ultimately become an opportunity for healing growth and the creation of genuine relationships based on honesty and mutual respect. Danny was preparing for 4th grade with excitement rather than anxiety. Marcus was planning a summer vacation that would include both of us as co-parents traveling together for Danny's benefit. Madison was building a career based on her own skills rather than inherited money, and I was learning to make decisions based on confidence rather than fear. Mom, do you think we'll ever see Grandma Patricia again? Danny asked one evening as we worked together in our small garden. That will be your choice to make when you're much older, sweetheart. Right now, she's learning about consequences for bad choices, and we're learning about building good relationships with people who treat us with respect. I think our family is better now, even though it's smaller. Why do you think that? Because everyone tells the truth, and nobody has to be scared of making someone angry. Danny's simple wisdom captured the essence of what we'd gained through surviving Patricia's abuse and manipulation. We'd lost the illusion of extended family unity, but we'd gained authentic relationships, financial independence, and, most importantly, the freedom to live according to our own values rather than fear of someone else's disapproval. As we finished planting tomatoes in the garden that would feed our family through the summer, I realized that we were finally building the life I'd always wanted for Danny, a life characterized by safety, honesty, and the knowledge that real love protects rather than controls. 1 year after Danny's accident, we were invited to speak at a conference for healthcare workers and social service providers about recognizing and responding to multi-generational family abuse. Standing at the podium in the hotel conference room, looking out at 200 professionals who worked with vulnerable families, I reflected on how much our story had taught us about resilience, justice, and the meaning of true family. This time last year, I believed that family loyalty meant accepting manipulation and control in exchange for financial security. I thought that protecting my son meant maintaining relationships with people who claimed to love him even when their actions suggested otherwise. Danny sat in the front row with Marcus coloring in a book, but occasionally looking up to smile at me. He'd insisted on coming to the conference because, in his words, other kids need to know that grown-ups will listen when they tell the truth about being hurt. The most important lesson we learned is that genuine family relationships are built on respect, honesty, and protection rather than obligation, fear, and financial dependence. I continued, real love empowers people to become independent and confident, while manipulation disguised as love keeps people dependent and afraid. I shared the warning signs we'd learned to recognize: financial assistance that came with increasing strings, attached isolation from community resources, and support systems threats disguised as concern, and the use of children as weapons in adult conflicts. Patricia was skilled at creating situations where questioning her motives felt like ingratitude, where seeking independence felt like betrayal, and where protecting my son felt like destroying the family. These dynamics are common in manipulative relationships, and they're designed to make victims doubt their own perceptions and judgments. The audience listened intently as I described how Patricia's systematic approach to control had nearly succeeded in convincing me that I was an inadequate parent who needed her guidance and support to raise Danny successfully. The breakthrough came when I finally prioritized my child's immediate safety over family harmony. When Danny was hurt and Patricia demanded that I leave the hospital to help with a party, I realized that her version of family loyalty was actually a threat to my son's well-being. After my presentation, a woman in her 40s approached me with tears in her eyes. "Your story sounds exactly like my relationship with my mother-in-law. She pays for my daughter's daycare, but she makes all the decisions about schooling activities, even medical care. When I try to assert my authority as a parent, she threatens to withdraw support and leave us financially devastated." "How long has this been going on?" I asked. 4 years. Since my husband died and I became a single mother. She moved in to help and gradually took over every aspect of our lives. My daughter has started asking why Grandma gets to make all the important decisions instead of me. This conversation was repeated throughout the day with different variations. Social workers, nurses, teachers, and other family members shared stories of recognizing similar patterns in families they served or experienced personally. "The most valuable thing about your presentation was learning that financial independence is possible," one young social worker told me. "I've been working with families who stay trapped in abusive situations because they believe they have no other options for support." Dr. Chen, who'd also presented at the conference about trauma recovery in children, reflected on Danny's progress during the flight home. "Danny has become an advocate for other children dealing with family abuse. He's learned to articulate his experiences in ways that help adults understand the child's perspective in these situations." It was true. Danny had recently helped a classmate whose grandfather was making him uncomfortable with inappropriate physical affection. Instead of keeping the secret, Danny had encouraged his friend to talk to Mrs. Rodriguez and had offered to go with him for support. Danny told his friend that grown-ups who really love kids want them to feel safe and comfortable, even if that means the grown-ups' feelings get hurt. Dr. Chen continued, "He's internalized healthy relationship dynamics in a way that will protect him throughout his life." Marcus had also found purpose in our experience by connecting with other fathers who'd been manipulated out of relationships with their children by controlling family members. There's a support group for dads who've lost access to their kids through family court manipulation or interference from extended family, he'd told me recently. "Sharing our story helps other fathers understand that they have legal rights and that persistent effort can rebuild damaged relationships." The financial restitution had enabled us to establish the Danny Thompson Foundation, a small nonprofit organization that provided emergency financial assistance to single parents, leaving abusive or manipulative family situations. In its first year, the foundation had helped 47 families transition to independence without compromising their children's safety or well-being. The irony is that Patricia's stolen money is now being used to help other families escape exactly the kind of manipulation she perfected. Sarah had observed during our most recent board meeting. Her crimes are funding solutions to the problems she created. Madison had also found her path to redemption through advocacy work. She'd become a volunteer with the state's elder abuse prevention program, using her understanding of financial manipulation to help identify and stop similar schemes targeting vulnerable seniors. I spent years benefiting from stolen money while telling myself I didn't know where it came from. She told me during our monthly family dinner. Now I can use that experience to recognize and prevent other families from being victimized. The relationship between Madison and Danny had slowly rebuilt based on honesty about past mistakes and commitment to future transparency. Danny had set his own boundaries, choosing to spend time with Madison in supervised settings until he felt confident that she would prioritize his safety over her own convenience. I like Aunt Madison now because she tells the truth about why she made bad choices before, he'd explained to Dr. Chen. She doesn't try to pretend it didn't happen or that it wasn't her fault. She says she's sorry and she's learning to do better. As we marked the anniversary of the accident with a family barbecue in our backyard, I looked around at the people who'd become our chosen family, Marcus and Danny, playing catch, Madison and Jason helping with dinner preparation. Sarah's children running through the sprinkler with Danny, and Dr. Chen sharing stories about her own family's immigration experience. These relationships were built on mutual respect, honest communication, and genuine care for each other's well-being. No one in our chosen family used financial support as leverage for control. No one demanded secrecy about problems or conflicts. No one expected loyalty that required compromising personal safety or values. Mom, do you think we're happier now than we were before? Danny asked as we cleaned up after dinner. What do you think? I think we're happier because we don't have to be scared anymore, and because we get to choose who's in our family based on how they treat us, not just because they're related to us. Danny's insight captured the essence of what we'd learned through surviving Patricia's abuse and rebuilding our lives. Family isn't defined by blood relationships or financial obligations. Family is defined by people who consistently demonstrate love through actions that promote safety, independence, and authentic connection. I also think we're stronger now because we know how to recognize when people are trying to control us. Danny continued, Dr. Chen taught us that people who really love you want you to have your own opinions and make your own choices. As I tucked Danny into bed that night, he asked his usual questions about the next day's plans, expressed excitement about upcoming summer activities, and shared his thoughts about the book we'd been reading together. These ordinary conversations represented the extraordinary gift of raising a child who felt safe, expressing his thoughts and feelings without fear of punishment or manipulation. Mom, thank you for protecting me even when it was scary for you. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth, even when it was hard. Do you think other kids who are in bad situations will learn about our story and know that they can tell the truth too? I hope so, sweetheart. That's why we share our story, so other children know that adults are supposed to protect them and that there are always grown-ups who will listen and help when they need it. As I turned off Danny's bedroom light and headed downstairs to finish the evening routine, I reflected on the profound transformation our family had undergone. 1 year ago, we'd been trapped in a web of manipulation, financial dependence, and fear. Patricia's abuse had nearly succeeded in destroying Danny's trust in adults and my confidence in my own parenting abilities. But surviving that experience had taught us that healing is possible, that justice can be achieved, and that authentic relationships are worth the courage required to leave false ones behind. The most important lesson we learned was that love isn't demonstrated through control or dependence, but through empowerment and respect. Real family members want each other to succeed independently, not to remain dependent and grateful. Today, Danny knows that his worth isn't determined by his ability to manage adult problems or keep family secrets. Marcus knows that his relationship with his son is based on consistent presence and effort, not on someone else's permission or approval. And I know that my strength as a mother comes from prioritizing my child's actual needs over other people's expectations or demands. We'd lost the illusion of a large, supportive extended family, but we'd gained something more valuable: the confidence to build relationships based on truth, respect, and genuine care for each other's well being. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting someone you love? How do you think families can create environments where children feel safe telling the truth about their experiences? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to hear more stories about resilience, family dynamics, and the courage required to choose authenticity over convenience. Sharing this video might help other families recognize similar patterns in their own relationships. Thank you for listening to our story, and remember that every child deserves adults who prioritize their safety and well-being over family appearances or financial considerations. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who claim to love you, but consistently demonstrate otherwise through their actions. The truth may be difficult, but it's always more powerful than lies, manipulation, or fear. And healing, while challenging, leads to relationships and experiences that are more authentic and fulfilling than anything built on false foundations. Take care of yourselves and the people you love, and never underestimate the power of choosing courage over convenience when someone's safety is at stake.